The film opens in an opera house during a musical event. The place is soon compromised by a terrorist group. The Ukrainian police forces that have concentrated outside wake up their American counterparts. One of the American agents is the protagonist, whose name is never revealed throughout the film. After entering the opera house, the protagonist finds a guy and tests him with a secret phrase. The man leads him to some kind of an artifact. The protagonist gives it to his team and then returns back to save the innocent people, who are being threatened by the corrupt Ukrainian forces. A mysterious figure helps the protagonist, a guy that is not originally a member of his team. The protagonist makes it outside, but then is taken by some Ukrainians. While they torture him to learn CIA's secrets, the protagonist swallows a killing pill in order to die. However, he soon wakes up and is perfectly fine, because the last part of what happened was a test for him, created by the CIA. The boss, Faye, informs the protagonist that not everybody passes that test. Since he is to be trusted, he will introduce him to some concepts he has not encountered before. Soon, he meets with a female scientist of a secret organization called Tenet. The scientist, Barbara, introduces him to inverted bullets. Basically, these bullets fly backwards. Barbara says these bullets are being manufactured in the future, and somehow, they are being streamed back to them. Barbara is worried that whoever is creating these inversions might be able to invert larger objects as well. Doing some research, the protagonist ends up in India, where the inverted bullets came from. There, he meets with a fellow operative, Neil. At night, they set up their equipment and launch on a heavily guarded house. After dealing with the security, the protagonist holds Sanjay Singh at gunpoint. However, the real mastermind of this operation is his wife, Priya. She has a talk with the protagonist and lets him know the man he is looking for is a Russian oligarch, Andrei Sator. She advises him to get close to him and find out how he is receiving the inverted bullets. The protagonist meets with a guy from the British intelligence service who tells him the only way to get near Sator is through his estranged wife, Kat, who is an art dealer. The protagonist approaches Kat with a forged Goya painting and lots of information. He knows that she and a forger friend of hers, the same guy who made this Goya, tricked Sator to pay $9 million on a fake painting. However, she reveals that Sator already knows about it, and he is using that painting as leverage on her. Basically, she and her son are living like his prisoners. Since that's the case, the protagonist asks her for an introduction with Sator. He will be able to help her if he takes Sator out of the equation. Kat can't do that right now, but informs him about the Oslo Freeport vaults, which Sator uses to transfer his illegal stuff. The protagonist tells Neil about it, and they decide to take a look at the vaults. However, the vaults are locked, and they will have to work out some kind of a plan in order to get them opened. Additionally, Neil suggests they blow up a plane in order to create a distraction. Their associates throw a plane into a building and buy them enough time. The protagonist and Neil start looking around until they find two weird machines. When the machines spin, two agents come out of them and attack the protagonist along with Neil. The protagonist fights with an inverted agent, and their battle looks quite peculiar. Neil fights with a normal agent whose helmet is removed. We don't actually see his face, but Neil does and decides to let him go. Meanwhile, the protagonist pins his opponent down, but the inverted agent is pulled away by the power of inversion. Later, Priya tells the protagonist that the machines he found in the vaults are called turnstiles. They are used for inversion. She assumes the agents who came out of the turnstiles were probably the same person. The protagonist wonders how Sator built the turnstiles, but Priya says he did not. The technology was given to him by somebody from the future. Kat introduces the protagonist to Sator soon, and they share a quick chat. The next day, the three of them go sailing, and Kat tries to kill Sator. However, the protagonist turns around and saves him because he needs him. Sator meets with him later and thanks him for saving his life. In return, the protagonist asks for Sator's help to steal some plutonium, which both of them need. Soon, the protagonist meets with Neil, and they plan their operation. A Ukrainian convoy will be soon driving in the streets, and they will be carrying the package they stole back in the Opera House incident. The protagonist's team uses 4 heavy vehicles in order to trap the designated Ukrainian vehicle while it is on the move. The protagonist steals an orange briefcase, and then Neil picks him up in his own car. The protagonist opens the briefcase in order to check it, but there is no plutonium in there. Instead, he sees the artifact which he saw back in the Opera House. Sator now approaches the protagonist in an inverted car, asking to get the briefcase while holding Kat at gunpoint. Neil mentions this artifact is more dangerous than plutonium, and they should not give it to Sator, but the protagonist can't let Kat die. An inverted Sator takes the case while letting Kat to die. We know Sator is inverted because he wears an oxygen mask. Inverted humans can't breathe in reverse, so they have to wear oxygen masks. The protagonist saves Kat, but Sator's men seize them again. The artifact is not in the briefcase, and Sator wants to know where the protagonist hid it. Sator shoots Kat with an inverted bullet, and the protagonist tells him he left the artifact in the BMW. After a friendly team of agents comes in to fight off the bad guys, Sator uses the turnstiles to escape while the protagonist tells Neil that he lied about where he left the artifact. Now, the protagonist wants to save Kat by stopping the radiation coming from the inverted bullet. The only way to do that is to go to the past. The protagonist is warned that things will appear a bit strange. It will seem like the world is inverted, but in reality, only he will be inverted. In addition, he is advised not to interact with his past self because that would mean death for both of them. The protagonist is involved in the car chase that happened earlier, but Sator spots him and attacks his car, flipping it over. Then he sets him on fire, but the transfer of heat works in reverse for an inverted person. Instead of burning, the protagonist suffers hypothermia. In any case, he is saved by Neil and they are heading to Oslo Freeport, where they encountered their first turnstiles. The protagonist mentions that Sator now has the artifact because he took it from the inverted version of him. Neil reveals that he knows more than he will admit. He explains that Sator is building a machine called the Algorithm, which will be able to reverse the entropy of the world. Basically, Sator wants to invert the whole world in order to destroy it. Soon, they arrive at the Oslo Freeport and approach the vaults dressed as agents. The protagonist tells Neil to wait outside while he enters the vaults. Now, he is the one to fight with his own self, just like he fought with himself earlier from the opposite point of view. Eventually, he walks into the turnstile and comes out from the other end, becoming the version of himself that was fighting with Neil. When he is left alone, he opens up the vault area so Neil can get in with Kat. The protagonist steals an ambulance while Neil takes Kat through the turnstile before he runs to get her into the ambulance. With Kat being fine, the protagonist meets with Priya in a past moment and makes her reveal that she already knew about the algorithm, which consists of 9 pieces. One of those pieces was the latest artifact that Sator acquired. He now has compiled the algorithm and can use it whenever he wants. The protagonist comes up with a plan and outlines it for Kat and Neil. They will travel back in time on the day of the 14th, which is the day of the Opera Siege. Kat will find Sator onto his yacht and stall him while the protagonist and the men from the Tenet organization will disassemble the algorithm. However, Sator must not die before they do, because he has a dead man's switch. If he dies, the algorithm will be activated. Kat notifies them that they have to be quick because Sator is suffering from pancreatic cancer and might die unexpectedly. Everybody is now transferred in the past, and Commander Ives informs them they will perform a temporal pincer movement attack, which for them means they will attack with 2 different teams. The red team will move forward in time while the blue team will be inverted. He clarifies they need to be extremely careful because the enemies will be defending hard. They also have inverted troopers and weapons. The fight begins on the battlefield while Kat also approaches the yacht. Kat meets with Sator and tells him she wants things to be better between the two of them. Sator shows her a pill he borrowed from the CIA, saying that everything will end for him if he swallows this pill. Kat tells him to not swallow it yet because they have a sunset to see. Meanwhile, the protagonist is trapped in a gate and can't get to the algorithm. Sator gives him a call and tells him that the future generations traveled in the past and gave him this technology. Their world is ending, and they decided to come into the past and end this generation, which is responsible for draining the planet's resources. The protagonist manages to break the gate open while Sator's guy tries to activate the algorithm. Tenet's guys are able to stop him and get their hands on the algorithm. In the meantime, Kat hates Sator so much that she can't let him believe that he won. Therefore, she kills him seconds before she gets clearance to do so. A large explosion happens on the battlefield, but thankfully, it is not the algorithm. When the good guys make it outside, the commander grabs the algorithm and points a gun at Neil and the protagonist. Supposedly, nobody who has seen the algorithm should leave this place alive. However, he then shares the pieces of the algorithm with them and walks away. The protagonist has been suspecting that there is more to Tenet than he knows, so he asks Neil about it. Neil replies that he expected the protagonist to have figured it out by now. He reveals that he has known the protagonist for a long time because he was the one who recruited him. Furthermore, he says the protagonist was the man who created the Tenet organization, so he has a bright future in the past.